Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Raymond O'Brien, and he's coming to us from the UK. Hi, Raymond.
Hi, hello everybody out there in internet land. Just before I start, thank you, Peggy, for inviting me on. I very much appreciate that.
Well, thank you for coming on.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. My name is, as Peggy said, Raymond O'Brien. I have survived, I've been resuscitated 10 times and have survived a further 6 heart attacks since 2009. I am very lucky to be here, as you can imagine. And it's lovely to be here, but it hasn't been the best of journeys, as you can imagine. Being touched with cardiac arrest and heart attacks has a profound effect upon your life and affects others around you who are there to give help and care. So this is a brief, well, as succinct as I can keep it. This is what happened to me. I come from a family of seers. We see illnesses on people and sometimes have the ability to take pain away. I was driving home from work one day and the voice with a capital V inside my head told me, this was on a Wednesday, told me that, Raymond, you're going to die. And I got home, panicked so much, I called my mother, who was my teacher at the time, and I explained to her that, what the voice had told me. Mum didn't say a lot, because on the run up to this, I was drinking an awful lot. I was trying to run away from being a seer. I think that's probably the most, I didn't want it. I just wanted to lead a normal life. So I wasn't listening to Mum. Mum had advised me quite a few times, you need to stop drinking, you need to stop misbehaving, otherwise something bad will happen to you. So here I am, so I said, driving home, voice tells that I'm going to die. I could ring Mum, tell her this. The only answer I really got off her was, oh, which was unusual for my mum to say that. So Sunday came, Sunday night, I was playing some guitar in my house. I came down from my sound room and I have a cat. Well, at the time I had a cat called Mr. B, and I had managed to save Mr. B's life. He was attacked by a dog and I beat the dog off, and I remember saying to Mr. B, you owe me one. So if you bear that in mind, Sunday night comes around, I lock up my sound room, walk down to the house, I get into bed, and I suddenly felt these chest pains. I didn't think too much of them, to be honest, because I was doing some new chest exercises, so I expected some sort of chest pain, the muscle pain, should we say. So I turned over, and I still had the pain, and I thought, something's not right. I put my legs out of the bed and I got down on the floor and I did 20 press-ups, and that must have opened up the artery to my heart, and I felt great. Got back to bed, lay on my side again, the artery must have closed off, the return back to the heart. I got back out of bed, but this time with a real sense of urgency. My soul was saying to me, you are in big trouble, Raymond, you're in big trouble. So I've got out onto my stairwell landing, I've hit the light, bounced down the stairs, and in the corner of my sofa in my living room was my cat, Mr. B. And as I hit the light on, he had this look on his face, which prompted me to say to him, as I see the look on his face, I went, I know, Boo, I'm in trouble. I had a cordless phone at the time, which I picked up. Someone said you need to call for the ambulance. So I looked at the phone, and in the UK, if we want to dial the emergency services, we hit 3 9s. I had the phone in my hand, but I distinctly remember hitting 2 9s, and then after that, I must have collapsed, must have just blacked out. So I'm lying on the floor. And the next thing that happens to me is that I smell something like smelling salts, and there's a rasp on my nose. And as I'm lying there, I've got the phone in my left hand, and I've opened my eyes, and there is my cat, Bill. And he's like face to face, and he's the one who, I thought, God. So I'm sure it was his breath that actually brought me around. And I've managed to grab my senses, and I hit the last 9, and I thought, I'm naked. I got through to the operator. She asked me, what's wrong? What service did I require? Ambulance, please. Get through to the other operator. She asked me my symptoms. I started telling her my symptoms, and I've got the phone to my ear. And as I said, I'm naked. And she's telling me, just sit down and wait for the ambulance. And you know, the weird things that go through your mind. I'm thinking, I can't sit here and have 2 strangers come into my house while I'm stark naked and then walk me out. That's not happening. So I managed to get back up the stairs. I'm really disorientated, Peggy. I opened up the wardrobe door, and I think t-shirt, shorts, and so put that on. I look behind me. Bill is following me around here just like a dog. So I walk back down the stairs, very unsteadily. I make it to the settee, and I sit down. I'm still talking to the operator, and I said, I've sat down now. I'm really out of breath by this time. You know, and at the time I was a very fit guy, can you believe? So I'm sitting there, and I thought, what time is it? And it was getting on for about 11:45 at night, my time. And I live in a very quiet place, so it's a small town, but I could hear the ambulance turn in at the top of my road. The operator, I said, the operator, they're here now. She said, leave the front door open. As I sat there on the sofa, I was disappearing fast. I must admit. I distinctly remember I'm sure it was through the lack of oxygen, of becoming one with my sofa. I just didn't feel anything. Bill was sitting next to me, and I remember my head was down, and out the corner of my eye, I heard a tap at the. There was a tap at the door, and out the corner of my eye, the door opened, and it was the 2 paramedics. And I remember one of the guys went, "What's going on here, fella?" He said, "You look a bit ill." And I was puffing and panting. I said, "Yeah, I am. I've got the most dreadful chest pains." He said, "Let's get you out to the ambulance." So I hobbled out, you know, shut the door behind me. I walked into the back of the ambulance. The guy was the driver, and there was a female paramedic called Rebecca. And she laid me down on the gurney. She put all of the probes onto me, and she said, "You have to breathe." I just couldn't breathe, you know. She put the pulse ox onto my finger, and I distinctly remember her saying, your oxygen levels are down to 26% rate. You have to breathe. And I started to vomit, which is a symptom of cardiac arrest or heart attack. And I gave her back the vomit bowl, and as she turned her back, something said, "If ever there's a time to check out, now's that time to check out." And I remember putting my chin onto my right shoulder, and the next thing, I was on the other side. It was that I was a tiny soul. I knew where I was. I knew that I'd left my body. I didn't see my body. I just remember being on the other side. And the first thing that touched me was the wind. The wind kind of went through me, and I felt like it gave that whoever was there was like the okay. So I remember looking down at my body, at my soul, and my soul was sexless. I remember being maybe 4 foot tall. As if there wasn't a stitch of clothing on me. And I remember looking at my toes, and because the feeling of the grass under my feet was like the softest of softest fur you could imagine. And as my toes scrunched into it, it just felt alive. And the colors were just so vivid. And I wasn't paying attention to what else was going on around me. I was just mesmerized with this green grass between my toes. And as I looked up, the next thought I had was, I wonder where you go, Ray, to get your wings. And off in the distance, I could see 2 men and 3 women. And the 3 women were in discussion with the 2 men. They were all in white. One guy, an elderly guy, looked like Father Christmas. There was another guy who was about 40 years old, silver beard, grey hair. But the three women were just stunningly beautiful. And so I've got the two men and the three women. The first person to observe me was the first woman. And she just turned her head and she slowly looked at me and she just hit me with this incredible smile. And she spoke to the others. I didn't see no lips move, so I'm assuming it was through just mind talk. And the next lady leant forward and she looked and she smiled. And then the third lady, she looked forward and she gave me a smile. And I thought, well, what happens next? And it was like I was pulled towards them on some sort of cord. And I found myself floating next to the shoulder height, next to the 40-year-old guy. And as I was next to him, I looked at him, and then I went next to the guy who looked like Father Christmas. And he was reading a brown tanned book. And I heard one of the ladies say, "Raymond's here." And he didn't even look up. All he said was, "He shouldn't be here." And I knew I shouldn't have been there, because when I first decided, if ever there was a time to check out, I knew I was being sneaky, and off I went. So I understood when he said he shouldn't be here, at least I think I did. And just with the movement of his hand, I came back into my body. And the next thing I know is that I'm waking up, and I've looked up, and there's the female paramedic looking down at me. And she went, "Are you okay, Ray?" I propped myself off on my shoulder. I looked up at her. I went, yeah. I said, "I'm really sorry about that." I said, "I was just on the other side there." She said, "Do you go on the other side a lot?" I said, yeah, I do. I said, I come from a family of seers. And I said, "If you park up, I'll make you, it sounds bizarre now. I said, I'll make you a cup of tea and I'll tell you all about it." She went, no, Ray. She said, "We're still outside your house." She said, "You died." She said, "Your eyes were in the back of your head and we've had to resuscitate you." And she leant over me and flicked the clock. There's a digital clock in the back of the ambulances here. She said, "You died at exactly 12 o'clock. That clock went to zero." And I don't know, it didn't mean nothing to me, but it obviously meant something to her. And I remember thinking, she's obviously got this wrong, but we'll go along with it, you know. They've taken the time to come out to do whatever they've done to me. So I don't want to be unkind. I'll just go along with it. And so we take off. I remember the blue lights flashing off the sides of the houses. The next thing, we pulled up outside the hospital, which thankfully was like only 10 minutes away. And I remember the doors bursting open and being bounced out the back on this gurney and being wheeled through the corridors, and the fluorescent lights just going over my head. I'm thinking they've all got this wrong, that as soon as they find out, you're going to be back home in an hour, right? And they wheeled me into the ICU unit, and the next thing I hear is this beautiful Irish lady's voice who had come down to eye level with me. And she said, "We need your next of kin's telephone number, Ray." I remember I turned to her and I went, "Am I that bad?" So I was really shocked. And she went, "Yeah, you are." And I thought, wow. And I remember looking at the clock and realizing that my mum was quite old and frail, and I didn't want her to be rattled at that time of night, you know, because her son might not make it through the evening. So I said, "Well, here's my mum's telephone number, but don't ring her unless I don't make it. Like, you know, that's the only time I want you to call her." And then it went from paradise to just hellish. They start, as much as I know, I actually know the cardiac rehab specialist in the hospital. That saved my life. We get on quite well. I often I've given a talk at this hospital about being resuscitated and the psychological effects of that happening to yourself. So in my dealings with the hospital that saved my life, I'm now a fully qualified clinician in counselling and psychotherapy, and all I deal with is the psychological ripples of surviving a cardiac arrest. But I have a foot in either world, the spiritual world, because obviously what happened to me. But to work with hospitals, I needed to become qualified to give credibility to the work that I do. So Darren Valley Hospital, the hospital that saved my life, have been really gracious in allowing me to speak of them, to kind of be an ambassador for them, really. So, and that's what I do whenever, when I talk to people like yourselves, just to let others out there know that there are people out there who deal within this professional world, but have the experiences to really deal with you. So with all that in mind, there's a guy called Rob Morrison, head of cardiac resus, and I asked him with my dealings, what happens to us when we get brought into the ICU unit? And he said, Ray, we just start pumping you with drugs. A lot of these drugs can give psychotropic events. Some people may not come out of these events for quite a long time. So it gave me an understanding to try to sort the wheat from the chaff. So there I am, back in the ICU room. The woman has said to me, we don't think you've got long to live. Right, okay. I remember accepting that really quickly. And I felt like I was on a diving board. And in front of me was this blackness. And somebody was about to give me a boot up the backside and kick me into this blackness. And before that happened, I was still conscious, and I was aware of the crash team doing what they had to do, putting the paddles on me and injecting me with whatever they were doing to me. And I started to feel cold. I got cold very quickly. And I remember out the corner of my eye, and I don't know what it is to this day, whether it was my life force, I don't know. I just see it slip out from almost from the side, from my side. I watched it. And I knew death was coming, and then I was gone. Then they brought me back again, and this went on and went on and went on. They told me they stopped counting at 5 resuscitations, but they think 9 is 9 times they're resuscitating in the ICU. I remember being brought back. I remember being with my nose stuck on the ceiling, falling back into my body. I remember another time being resuscitated again, and being brought round and 2 people on either limb holding me down. And I remember one nurse saying, Ray, it's us, Ray. Gone again. I remember it happening again, coming up like some sort of Hammer House horror movie, where I came up at right angles, and I remember the staff recoiling, going backwards, and I remember my finger pointing at them all, and I cursed and said that I needed that, and then I crashed back down, and then this kept going on. And I'd gone to a place called the Grey, which I've never forgotten about. It was the exact opposite of the first event in the back of the ambulance. I had bearing in mind that I did come from a family of seers, so people would more often than not come from around the world. I was a registered healer before I had my cardiac arrests. So in the UK, if you're a registered healer with the Healing Trust, it allows you to work within the hospitals. You're legally recognised as a healer. So I'd done all this before I'd had the cardiac arrest. So I was already getting exposure throughout the world through the Healing Trust. So clients were starting to come to see me from around the world, either to help with their pain, because people would say, when I sit next to you, the pain stops. And this, when I ended up, I'll get to that maybe at a later time, but I ended up working on a chemo unit after I had my started to recover. They asked me through an incredible event. So in the Grey, a guy from California had come over to see me before my cardiac arrest, had a brain tumor. We sat down, I worked with him, had great results with him. And it was a terminal illness that he had. And so he came to my house, I worked on him. His wife had told me later on that he had passed. I called him California Dave. And she said, Dave didn't have the chance to thank you, but he wanted to thank you for all of your help, So I'm now go to the ICU unit, and I've gone to this place called the Grey, and I'm this tiny little soul. And I remember standing next to a man who had a great big grey overcoat on. And I remember floating up really slowly. And as I got to shoulder level, I'd realized that I was amongst a sea of people. And it looked like a crowd from maybe a rock concert who were all tightly packed together. They were all shifting along at a really slow speed. And as I've got up to height, up to Dave's eye level, I've looked over the head of people, and the wind has appeared. But the wind was nothing like I had experienced in the back of the ambulance. That this wind was scared the life out of me. It was like barbed wire, and it cracked over people's heads. And as it cracked, it dissipated into this black kind of carbon dust. And nobody looked up, Peggy. Everybody had their head down. And as I got to the eye level of Dave, he went, "Ray?" I went, "Dave?" He went, "What are you doing here?" I went, "I don't know what I'm doing here." And he said the same as Father Christmas. He went, "You're not supposed to be here." I went, and I kept floating up. And the next thing I feel is this like, ouch. And it was the paddles being applied again, they're being electrocuted again. And this went on. By the time it stopped, I think it was about 1:15. And I was exhausted. I remember the Irish nurse. I looked at her and I smiled, and she went, "Oh my God, it's great to see you smile." And then at that moment, I don't know how, Peggy, but I knew it was all over, and but totally exhausted. And then they wheeled me onto the ICU ward, and they put me on morphine. My teeth were cracked. I had cracked ribs. And then in the morning, one of the nurses, she said, "There's someone here to see you." And out of the corner of my eye, guess who it was? It was Rebecca, the paramedic, who first saved my life. And she'd obviously finished a shift, but had wanted to have a chat. So as she came walking towards me, she was within earshot, and I heard her say to her friend, "Here he is." She went, "I can't believe he's still alive." And she came and stood next to me. And what she said it was just strange. Like, the coincidences that, we were expecting to come to a dead body, really. She said, if you have an out of hospital cardiac arrest, the chances of surviving on your own, I just like, she said, but when we start adding in that we were just having our tea break, which was close to your house, and the other coincidences, I can't remember them all, but they were enough for her to come back just to see how I was. And so I was still numb. I still thought I didn't even know where I was. I thought it was all still a dream. So she disappeared. But one of the times when I died in the ICU, I remember sitting on my forehead, my soul. And I remember how cold my body was. I could feel it through the undersides of my feet. And there was a guy there called Barry. And I remember as I sat on my forehead, I looked to my left, and he said to the rest of the ICU unit, he was about to give me another blast of the resuscitation machine. And I remember him saying, "If this doesn't bring him back, nothing will." And I remember my soul saying, "He doesn't know that this is really going to hurt you." So he blasted me. So fast forward, next morning, the two ladies are gone. The next person who comes in is Barry. And he walks up to the right-hand side of my bed, and he looks like left and right, and he leans in, and he points his finger at me. And I won't swear, but he said, "You are beep, beep, bizarre." And I remember looking up at him, and I said, why is that? He said, "The amount of times that you came back last night," he went, it was just incredible. So he said, "But I just wanted to pop in, and off he went." Then the cardiac sister who ran the crash team, I was talking, she's become a great friend. I was talking to her about it not long after it. And I, just trying to get some information about what went on that night to compare what I had still recalled. And she said, you were verging on the miraculous. She said, that's all we could say. We couldn't believe you kept coming back. And so that's why we kept on. And I thought, poof. So then my family came in, didn't recognize my family at all, not a single one. They said, your family's here. And I remember thinking, family? I've got a family. I had the mindfulness to think, well, I can't say I don't recognize you, because if they say they're my family and I say I don't know them, well, then they'll be devastated. Perhaps I'll tell them further down the line. But for the meantime, I'll go along with it. So I did, and then I got shot out of the hospital 4 days later. Came home, didn't recognize the house, didn't know who I was, and then the seeing side became really powerful. I struggled with that. I remember I was invited back to cardiac rehab over here in the UK. If you have a cardiac arrest or strong cardiac history, you've been operated on, they'll ask you to come back for 10 days rehabilitation just to make sure that you understand how you take care. So it's a really good 10-day sessions to attend. So I go. I think, well, this will be great. There was a nurse who asked me one day, because I'd isolated myself from everybody, even in a short period of time, like maybe 10 days after the cardiac arrest. I still don't know what's happened to me. I'm still thinking it's all a bad dream, so I'm on my own. My family are ringing me up, and they're asking me, "How are you?" And I'm kind of avoiding the calls. So many survivors out there, will probably understand that pretty well, why we do that, just to try to get some form of grounding. So I knew nothing. I knew nothing about the symptoms of surviving a cardiac arrest. I just knew zip. That didn't know what to expect.
Did knowing who you are and who your family was and stuff come back during that time?
No. That's a great question, Peggy. It took, to be honest with you, and I can say this now because it's my sister knows, and because she was part of it. I had to say to my sister that I lied. That was a really difficult thing to do. I had to confess and say that I don't recognize any of you. I don't have that connection that I had with you all before my cardiac arrest, and I couldn't live the lie anymore. It was eating me up. And then I told my sister one day, and oof, yeah, that was yeah. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I suppose I was in a way, but to put myself in my family's shoes, to hear me say that, it was devastating. I didn't. Raymond, who died that night, didn't come back. It was start from ground zero again. And so, obviously, what connection have I got with you guys? I don't know. So it was something which I had to make, and have made, a conscious effort to try and get back. But my mum never came to.
You did it out of kindness, though.
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah. My mum never got over it. She couldn't, and I don't blame her. She just didn't understand how that could happen. How could you not recognize your mum, and the rest of your family? And that took a long time to come to terms with. So mum passed without her really knowing the truth. She went into Alzheimer's. She passed with Alzheimer's. So that's one of the ouch things that I'll always carry. But I think, again, it's something to talk about, because many of us survivors are probably walking around with massive guilt issues, and it's something with my therapy work I do when I speak to people. about these events. To have these insights, to understand the impact upon the families. I believe you have to go through the grinder to sit in this position, the same as you. You speak from personal experience, and so do I. But there's not many of us who enter the medical world as I've done, to help others who don't know where we are at. So again, I come from a clinical viewpoint, but also from a spiritual viewpoint, and I've managed to combine the two. So in that respect, I have a great deal of satisfaction about helping others. So yeah, I did live a lie. It was very difficult. Yeah, but
do you still have no memories of before this happened? Childhood memories?
The bizarre thing is, I have lots of memories of being with my family, but it was the connection that had never come back. It was Raymond O'Brien died that night, and then a new one came back after an hour and a quarter. And I never even understand the need to grieve for the loss of the old Raymond. I was, for instance of how the connection was separated. I spent nearly 2 weeks in my house thinking that I was in a client's property, and I used to be a plumbing and heating engineer. So clients would give me the keys to the house with absolute trust and say, off you go and do your work. And that's what I would hold really dearly, would be that trust that people have left you your house right out. So I treated my own house as a client. I thought it was in a client's house, and so would only cook. But somehow the mind would come to terms with, well, yeah, I know you're sleeping in a client's house, but we haven't got an answer for that. It just felt normal. So that was the disconnect that I was going through. So when I came back to cardiac rehab, and one of the nurses said, what are you going to do now that you can't do your work anymore? That was the first time somebody had ever said that to me. I remember standing there thinking, what? But I remembered that I was a healer and that I come from a family of seers. So I panicked. I thought, oh, this nurse wants an answer. What am I going to do? And I said, well, I'm a registered healer. I'll hire a room here, and I'll see people here. She said, "What do you
do the work you used to do because of your health?"
Yeah, because I suffered hypoxia and lack of oxygen to the brain.
Okay.
It doesn't take a lot to blue screen me out. So I became unsafe to practice, really. I couldn't deal with gas. I wouldn't know if I got open-ended pipes. I wouldn't understand what procedures I'd have to do to make safe before I worked with gas. So all of that was, I still, well, in actual fact, I didn't even know I was a gas engineer as I was wandering around the house. I kept seeing my van outside, and eventually it started to annoy me because there was a van that wasn't moving. And obviously deep in my subconscious, it was saying it's your van, but I'm going, no, it isn't. So my name was on the side of it, said what I did, but I didn't associate. That there was even a motorcycle, and I remember thinking, this guy rides a motorcycle, and I had this crazy idea that I don't know how to ride it, but I feel I've got to take it out for a ride. So I don't know how, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. I mean, like, it's really against the law. Like, you're not supposed to do it. But because I had disassociated myself from my family, I had, in effect, I had isolated myself. So, there was no one around me, even close friends. I'm thinking, who are you? So I just shut the door, and that was, avoided everyone until I kept looking at this motorcycle. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to ride it, but I will take it out. So I did. And
what do you make of that? Do you think, like, you got his brain, his as in the guy you were before, like his brain, like his memories, but not his soul? I mean,
that's a beautiful way. That's what that is a great description. That is exactly how it was, Peggy. and in 13 years, that's the first time I've really, I'd like to use your analogy that further down the line, if I may, because
Yeah, it's like
that's
you got
perfect.
his brain, but not his soul.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. It was like, oh, it's Ray, but I'm thinking, I'd have to have a second thought of going, why has he said that to me? Why have I gone? So the disconnect was profound. I'd literally felt somebody had beamed me down to earth, and I was agog. I remember seeing a crow fly by me, and I couldn't understand why no one else in the street was going, what is that? That's how far the disconnect was with me. And in one way it was magical, but in another way it was really traumatic. It was disturbing. And the cardiac rehab was the real eye-opener. Was when she asked me, what do you see? Why do you want a room here? I said, I should give me an example of what you see. And I went, cancers, swelling of just reeled off a few things. And she said, cancer. I said, yeah. And then the nurse asked me, did she have cancer? And it was the first time I was asked for my seeing ability, could I see anything? So I asked her a couple of times, are you sure? Are you sure you want to know? Are you positive you want to know? She was like, yeah, I do. And then when I work that way, I go into a really light trance. I can still talk to you, but I know that I'm working. And I asked the nurse to turn around. So she's now got her back to me. And I could see it already. But I needed to tell her where it was. So I remember looking down at my right hand, and I watched my finger come up, my index finger, and it touched her just below her left shoulder blade. And I tapped her there, and I went, it's here. I said, it's about 1 millimeter inside. I went, but it's asleep. It looked like a mouse dropping. That's how I'd seen it. And she turned around, and I'll never forget. That was the look in her eyes. I thought she was going to tell me off. And she said, really professionally, beautiful lady, really professionally, she said, for your information, where your finger tapped is where I had a tumor on the back wall of my lung, and the consultant had to go in beneath at least my shoulder blade and cut it out. But he told me he had to leave a piece in there. And she said, for your information, it's not 1 millimeter, Ray, it's 1.2, I think, something like that. She said, and it matters the size, because obviously it gets monitored. So she said, do you want to work here? And I thought, wow. I went, yeah. I said, I'd love to work here. She said, do you want to work on the chemo unit? And yeah, okay. So she said, you're quite famous here in this hospital because of what had happened. It was such a bizarre incident. So the word had got around, and so that's what happened. I had the interview. Whilst I was in the interview, somebody else asked me what was wrong with them. We had to wait for somebody to come back. It was a really informal interview. It was some of the members of the staff who worked on the chemo unit, and so this other ward sister came back in, and she stood at the other end of the room, and she said, we've heard all about you. We like what we hear. What do you see on me? That's what her next question was. And I remember looking left and right and thinking and saying, what, here? She said, these are all my friends. I haven't got any secrets. I said, you've got an inflamed left ovary, I think. And the room went, she went quiet. She had that same look that the nurse had. And she said, the reason why I'm late is because I was just at the so-and-so fertility clinic having the very thing looked at. And she said, we're not going to let you work with the patients. She said, you're just going to stay with us and just work with us. And but I did work with the patients, and that was, that's a whole new chapter. That was phenomenal. To sit next to people and they say, when I sit next to you, the pain stops. Or they'd send me patients who were hysterical who they couldn't administer drugs to. They would send them down to me, and somehow they'd fall asleep, or they would. So I had this incredible impact upon people, and it just kept expanding. I was there for 18 months. I did some incredible stuff on that unit. I think just
You don't do it anymore?
I was told to leave. I had this ability to see the cancer, and I had to make my peace. And my mother said to me one day while she was still lucid, she said, "You have to leave the chemo unit." And I went, "Well, why is that, Mum?" She said, "You've done enough there." And I thought, well, I like it there, so I'm not going to go. I'm going to go against what you say, but I'll keep an eye out and see if anything comes up. And she was right. I walked past a patient there who was asleep on having his chemo. As I walked by, something came out of him and snarled at me. Something that's I don't even. I remember, like, and I walked by and I went to the tea room, and I remember standing in there thinking, now I know what Mum meant. And so all the time I was on that chemo unit, I was always in connection with the cancer that people had, and because I always had to make my peace with them, you know. And there's a story to that. The very lady who I had tapped on her shoulder, on a shoulder blade, below her shoulder blade, I remember sitting in her office with another member of staff, and I watched the cancer float out of this woman and go into one of her work companions. And guess what happened? That sometimes I can see the cancer 3-4 years down the line, even before an MRI machine will pick it up. And I remember sitting in the office, and I watched it come out, and it drifted into the other lady, and I didn't say anything. And I'd heard that this lady was off work, and I'd already known, you know, I'd send myself emails just to make sure I wasn't going mad. And if I have to verify my work, this is what I'd seen 4 years ago. Here's the email. So I'd had a brief meeting with this lady once again, and I remember going to her office. I remember looking at her. She was the recipient of her workmate's cancer, you know, and I remember having a brief meeting, and she knew that I knew what was going on, you know, but I didn't say anything. She actually asked me, "Do I have cancer?" And I already knew, and I knew she wouldn't live, but I was worried that I was going to be wrong, you know. So I didn't say much to her. All I said to her was that miracles happen, you know. And she looked at me shocked. I said, "You know they happen, because look what happened to me here." And that was all I could tell her. I didn't see her for about another year, you know, when she said, "Would you like to meet for coffee?" And it was just before lockdown started here. And I remember waiting for her. And what I did, Peggy, I'd done a drawing of her and I put it in my back pocket. She hadn't told me where it was, but I had seen where it was, like, you know. And so I remember sitting waiting for her, and this shadow appeared in front of me, and this voice said, "Hello, Ray." And I'd looked up, and there she was. Like, you know, she didn't have a hair on her head. She had that, you know, that hat that most women wear if they've lost their hair, and I just knew. She was a beautiful friend, an absolute beautiful friend to me. And we went for coffee. And we sat down, and she said to me, "I bet you're wondering why I haven't contacted you." Yeah, she said, I was angry with you because I knew that you knew that I wasn't going to live. And so she said to me with a smile, she went, "So," and she tapped her hands on the table, "I want you to tell me where it is." And I had the drawing. So it was dated and signed. I pulled it out, and it was the exact same place where a mate had it. And she said, "I understand now why you didn't tell me." You know. Yeah. So that was it. She passed. Didn't have a chance to say goodbye. She rang me, but I didn't recognize the number. and I didn't pick up. This was while she was in the hospice, so that was really difficult still to come to terms with, not being able to have last words with her. And so these are the consequences of some of the work that I do. And you know, sometimes it's hard to be a seer and to give people that kind of news, but it's balanced when somebody contacts me or I sit next to somebody and the pain stops, even you know, even if I can't take it away forever. One of the things that used to upset me was that I couldn't heal somebody, like, you know, so it never came back. And it affected my train of thought about being a seer. I wasn't satisfied with what I was able to do, until there was a Christmas TV show, and the TV show had visited a children's hospital, and they were on a cancer unit. And they got to this little 9-year-old girl, and they asked her, it was Christmas Day, they asked her, what would she like today for, you know, as a Christmas present? And she said, all she said was, I want 5 minutes relief from the pain. And it was like, it was like somebody slapped me, and it was like poof. And that was when I came to my senses of, you should be happy with what you can do. And you know, and if I could have, I would have stood next to that girl and given her 5 minutes pain relief. And that, seeing her had changed, had a massive impact on my viewpoint of how I help others now. And so yeah, I got a lot to thank that 9-year-old girl for. So that was the strengthening of what happened to me after my NDE experience, and still expands. I still, you know, I've given talks at teaching hospitals. I've done quite a bit of TV work. I do whatever I can. The last heart operation I had was last August, and I was in the prep room waiting to come in, and we still had to wear the masks. And I got onto the gurney, got wheeled into the operating theatre, and I heard a member of staff say, "Raymond O'Brien, that name sounds really familiar." And I remember looking over to this lady in theatre and thinking, oh, I don't recognise her face. And she said, "Did you give a talk here 8 years ago?" I said, yeah, I did actually. And she said, "You blew us away on that talk." And she said, "When you described to us that you weren't happy about being brought back," she said, "it had a profound effect upon us." She said, "It upset some of the doctors. They were angry to hear you say that." She said, "But myself and quite a few others in that room hadn't realized because the title of the talk was surviving a cardiac arrest and the psychological issues that follow after such an event." I was being interviewed by Professor Ken Spearpoint. He's a specialist within NDE. You might want to look him up. He does do really great work for near-death survivors, and he's a specialist within the cardiac field, and he's quite open-minded. So he interviewed me. So there I was in the A&E theatre, and being asked, did I give this talk? I said, yeah, I did. So she explained that we were so smug with us. Some of us were really smug that we saved your life. Like, we were sitting there going, yeah, it was us who saved him. And she said, but we didn't understand the consequences of that. And so now with that in mind, I was very lucky to have a very accurate "do not resuscitate" now. So that's something which I have with me, you know. So you can't resuscitate me again, and a very accurate one. So you know, if there's anybody out there as well, I don't want to get down the morbid route, but if you don't want to be resuscitated, it's called an advance directive. And it gives your wishes to what you want to be done to you if you have a cardiac arrest, because there's some really brutal treatment, you know, and many of us really suffer from that, you know, with massive psychological issues. And you know, so if you don't want to come back, do an advance directive, get it written up properly. If you can get a cardiac nurse to help you with that, because they'll understand the procedures about what they do to help somebody, to bring them back, and you know, it can be quite brutal. So, just bear that in mind. So as I said, I have an advance directive, so and I'm not to be resuscitated again. I personally don't want to go through it all again. I've seen enough. 10 resuscitations and 6 heart attacks. I'm a bit rinsed these days, to be honest with you, Peggy. I'm pleased to be a clinician in counselling and psychotherapy. That was probably what kept me going through the dark days, was the understanding. I was able to self-psychoanalyze myself of what's going on here, Ray. Why are you like this? Why, what are the effects? I'm a great believer in that. I personally can't go through all of this and not pass this knowledge on to other survivors. Parts of my experience was amazingly beautiful. Parts of it was absolutely horrific. But the other part is what I'm doing now is like, what you're hearing from me now with the psychological issues are some of the real effects that millions of us go through. It would quite often people would say to me, well, it's just all about love, Ray, and what was happening was that with the impact that my experience had upon myself, I couldn't achieve that self-actualization of it's just about love, and that had a negative effect on me. It meant that I couldn't achieve that, So when I started to be into my own practice and clients would come and sit in front of me, I used to think about, well, what if I was to say to this client, all you need is love, what does it do to them? So it altered my way of thinking. Sometimes just to say that is not enough. It can be soul destroying to the survivor, because it takes 4 years just to recover from a heart attack, let alone, from a physical viewpoint, let alone a cardiac arrest. So while somebody with the most beautiful meaning in the world is saying to you, well, love, all you need is love, that's not enough for some of us survivors. And we know the statistics of people who have suffered severe trauma through their experiences, that the suicide rates are massive. So something is not working within the treatment of these people. Maybe we're setting unobtainable goals for them to achieve, maybe because of the way the brain is. Many of us survivors don't know what's wrong with us until we come into a situation, and then we have to try to struggle with that. Maybe try to unhear something somebody said to us, or an event. I still, when I see an ambulance now, I seen one this morning, and I have to look away, So even after all of this time, with all of the training that I've had, and all of the clients who I've worked with and experiences that I've had, I still struggle. I still get to level black on many occasions, and it's all right. Don't try to hide it. Do you know what? I still try not to cry about it. I still, over here, if you're a therapist, and if you belong to a certain governing body, you have to be supervised once every 2 weeks. That's where I sit with my peers and we talk about how we practice and how maybe the client is impacting upon us. It's so we can get feedback, so others in the room will go, you should be careful because we're seeing something which may equate to you burning out. So this is without that. I remember maybe a month ago, as I explained about how it was affecting me when I was working with a client, I felt myself well up, and I was actually trying to hide my tears, and it wasn't until my supervisor said that this is really touching you. You need to start grounding with this, and that after so many years, 13 years, is when I remember saying to my peers, do you know what? I'm not going to try to hide it anymore. If I cry, I cry. It's too much to. But many of us feel that need for it. Do you know when they interviewed the veterans? Say like maybe Normandy, and the interviewer pushes them that little bit too much, and then the face fractures, and then the tears start. That's what I'm talking about. And for any interviewers out there, try not to push us too far. So many who I had seen, counsellors, psychiatrists. I remember almost being sectioned. I thought, am I going to be sectioned here when I was telling them what I was seeing, or my experience? These are great fears. And professionals, counter-transference, would not really want to know about how are you suffering. They want to know what was heaven like. And then your own physical problems come second to that.
Right.
And so massive, just absolutely, it's just come with its own. It can be difficult, but thank God I'm still here to help others, Peggy. And my mum asked me one day before Alzheimer's got her, why do you think you're back here? And I was kind of stunned by the question, because bearing in mind that my mum was my teacher, and I don't know, Mum. And before I had my cardiac arrest, I was traveling the world working on horses. I had this ability. Before, some people were asking me what's wrong with my horse, and they'd send me a picture. I got, well, this is what's wrong with your horse, and I got to such a degree that I'd found myself in California, and working in the corral with 12 horses. And like just yeah, that's what's wrong with it. That's what's wrong with it. So I was starting to get a name for it, and within the horsey circles, particularly here within the UK and spreading worldwide. So yeah, just seeing all of this kind of stuff. So very difficult to cope with, but lovely to be here and talk to you about it. So I'm sure, I know that there's thousands of your viewers who are going, I resonate with him. I know what he's talking about. There is a dark side to the NDE, which I wouldn't say that it's not spoken about. It is, but the dark side is not as sexy as I was in heaven and Jesus said this to me. It's not. It outshines. I had both of those experiences. And being on the other side and the first time, which I assumed was heaven. I don't know whether it was, but it was the most beautiful place that I have ever been to. Can you even just imagine how it felt? It was the incredulity and wonderment of it was just traumatic, and I realized you can be traumatized through wonderment, and that was what had happened to me. The being on the other side as a soul, and then being on the other side and meeting California Dave, the two were equal. The trauma of the two was balanced, and this is when my mum said to me, "Why are you back here?" And I went, "I don't know, Mum." And she went, "You're back here to help others." And I felt so deflated when I heard that. I thought, is that it? I'm back here to help. That's and the penny dropped long after Mum died. She went in 2016, and I probably realised it. What she said was maybe 3 or 4 years back. That was when I thought, I get it now. I understand the value of what Mum said. I recognise it now, and that's been my philosophy.
It sounds like she meant it as a compliment.
She did. Yeah. She knew that was all that was left for me to do, and because it suits the way my brain works. What I do comes from the most incredible source, whatever way you want to describe it. But it's a source for good, and to help others. Or other animals. I still these days get the odd call where somebody says to me, "What's wrong with my horse?" Or somebody remembers me when I'd worked on horses before, or even themselves. So it's nice to be able to bring the balance of the two to our meeting today, Peggy. It really is.
So how do you feel now? I mean, do you feel you get sucked dry from this? Like, do you feel give and like you feel empty, or does this just seem natural?
It's as natural to me as breathing. There are caveats to it. I'm not allowed just to look at a person and go, "Oh, this is what's wrong with you." I have to wait for the soul. It's the soul that talks to me. I'd reckon how, you may be asking, how do I recognize the soul? When I was on the chemo unit, there was one lady in particular, terminal cancer. She knew it. I sat in with a consultant with her, who gave her the news. I remember walking out. Then this was what I loved about helping, was that as we came out and she got this devastating news, and I think she had, within a month, like, you know, she wasn't going to be there, and she wouldn't be with her family anymore. And we're walking down the corridor. She's a very frail lady by this time, like, you know, but young, like, you know, 40, 45. And I remember her husband couldn't take it. He was waiting upstairs in the coffee shop. That's why I went in with her, and just to give her some support. The poor man just couldn't do it. He was just rinsed. And we were walking back down the corridor, and she asked me, she said, "Ray, will I be able to drive in heaven?" You know, and I remember looking at her and saying, "Tracy, where you're going, they're going to give you wings. You don't need to drive." Like, you know, and the sense of, she just said, "I know you've been there," she said, and I believe you. And to have experienced everything that I went through that night, and not just the night, I just want to say to others who are watching this, is that it was what I picked up on the chemo unit, and it resonated with me. You know, is that not many people talk about this, and it's the nearing death experience. It's how the person changes on the run up to their death. You know, so for me, it was lack of oxygen, you know, which affected my train of thought. It affected my behavior. It affected my patience. I remember my first heart attack. I remember it hitting down the inside of my arm. I was driving early one morning, but I didn't recognize it as a heart attack. But that would have already affected my psychological processing, as does when people were running up to being diagnosed with cancer. One of the themes that ran through when I was on the cancer unit was some of the patients' relatives would pull me up and go, "Ray, why does he say such horrible, vile things to me? You know, I'm there to help." And you know, when you've heard this quite a few times, you start to think that there's a theme going on here, and it was like it shook me, because I had said horrible, vile things on my run up to my death, but could never know why. It was so out of character, you know. So again, you know, those who are watching your show, who might be holding that, you know, I was there to the end, but you said this to me, you know, and you know, they can't understand why, you know, you know, I want to give them a little bit of an insight into that, why we may say these things. You know,
I think our anger comes to surface in moments of desperation like that.
Yeah, it does. And we don't know, you know, we don't know what's happening to us. Many of us, you know, until we're diagnosed or the event touches us, but we don't, you know, we only see it from our internal field of reference. We don't see it from the external field of what people are experiencing. You know, it's when it came to the cancer patients, it was the toxification of in the blood. It was the guests. It was their cancer that was, as the cancer was growing, it has to eat, you know. So anything that eats, what goes in has got to come out, you know. And these are picked up within the markers of the blood, and that's how they identify that you have cancer, you know, because of I know it's a simplistic term, but that's a way to explain it. But that's how I see it, and I smell. I get. There's a smell. I recognize it.
How do you think that happened, that cancer went from one woman to another and you saw that?
I've got no explanation. It was the first time I'd seen it. It was the first time, and I'll tell you what, people are probably watching this now and going, "What? Cancer is contagious. There's something wrong with this blood." But I'm only saying what I'd seen. You know, it's maybe later down the line we'll go, "Yeah, I can see how that works."
Is that the only time? Is that the only time you saw that?
That's the only time, but it's not the only time that I've seen cancer. You know, I've seen it. I've seen it within patients. I understand what it means to the cancer and what the ripples could be to you, of how the cancer gets angry. It's like, because now you're attacking it, and you know, it's a living organism. You know, it doesn't matter what we say; it's still part of us. So I used to feel such an amount of sadness for, I see people or heard of people who are on the cancer unit who've been fighting for 5 or 6 years, and I understand why people will go through all of that. I get that, the driver of life is everyone wants to live a little bit longer. But it comes at a price, and I'd seen that price on quite a few occasions, which left me questioning, what would I do? Would I do that? And the answer is still out there for me. They offered me the heart operation back in August. I was at death's door, and not just at death's door, but I was knocking on the door, really close. This is where all of the last 6 heart attacks came from over the last 2.5 years. I got lost in the system. COVID came. If it hadn't have been for a good buddy, a heart consultant, and Dr. Garney, he rang me up and said, "How did your operation go?" And I said, "I haven't had it." He said, "I put you in as an emergency operation, Ray." And he went, "Leave it to me." So within 6 weeks, they had me in, and they were doing what they had to do. I wasn't going to have the operation because I knew there'd be consequences. And if it wasn't for 2 people who everyone else didn't, they just said, "I respect your wishes," and but 2 people I listened to. I love their intentions. I know why they did it, but I shouldn't have had the operation. So I feel a hypocrite, to be quite honest with you, because now you have to pay the ferryman. And it's like you have to take what comes at you, because I chose to, where I was before the operation, I knew I was really close to death. I knew it. I'd already let go, and I'd been there before. I knew what it felt like. I wasn't moving, the blood was just circulating in it. It's just virtually heart attack after heart attack. And so, in all truthfulness, I know some people might not agree with it, but I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have had it. I should have stuck to my word.
This was last August?
This was last August, yeah. And why do I say that? The price I had to pay started even before I had the operation. They called me in for an MRI scan, and I had a vision about it, and I was really frightened. And it was in a really famous hospital here in London, St Thomas's Hospital, and they said they were going to test my heart out, and they're going to inject an iodine into me and see what was blocked. But I remember them saying, I thought, here it comes. They said, but there is a chance, a really rare chance, that there'll be that it will stop your heart, of what we're going to do. And I remember thinking, that's what I'm worried about. So I got there. I even rode my motorcycle there. I can't even believe it. That was how much I didn't think about this, how little I thought about what this procedure was. I got changed the changing room, walked out to the MRI machine, got put into the MRI machine. It was really tight in there, never been in one before, just lots of noise. And I was in there for, I don't know, getting on for nearly an hour, I think. And they said, just another 5 minutes. And I thought, yeah, I was wrong. I don't know, why was I so worried? Oh, Ray, we're out of here in 5 minutes. Great. And then I heard the tannoy just above my head crackling to life again. So we're just going to come in, we're just going to inject you. And it was like, oh no. I felt the coldness coming to my left arm, whatever they injected me with. And then the last time I suffocated to death, which is what happened to me, when you have a cardiac arrest, that's what in effect, that's what happens to you. It's like you just stop breathing, and then boom. I remember thrashing around as I was suffocating, and the same thing happened inside the MRI machine. I looked like something out of that John Carpenter's film, The Thing, where it was thrashing around on the floor, like, you know. But I was doing this inside the machine, and I knew I was suffocating to death.
Oh.
And yeah, I knew it. I knew it. And I looked down. I remember my knees were banging the top of the.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. So that was the price. The next thing, I blacked out, and it was over. And I remember waking up. They had the antidote. They said whatever happens, it will bring you around in 30 seconds, like, you know. And but I don't think I don't know how alert they were. I don't know how long I was out for. And but they injected me with the antidote. Obviously, kick-started my heart. And I remember being stunned. Absolutely, it was like I'd been hit by Lennox Lewis or Marvin Hagler. I was just smashed. I remember sitting there in my robe with my feet hanging over the edge of the machine, and I was looking at the staff, and they were all going, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" And all I could think, Peggy, was, "I've been here before. That's all I've got to hold on to. I've been here before." And I went, "Yeah, I'm okay." You know.
Were you allergic to the dye?
I couldn't tell you why I had the reaction, but they were ready for it. You know, so it obviously happens. And it wasn't the dye. They give you it was the amphetamine. It was to speed up the heart, and then they were going to give you the dye. You know, so what they had me on beta blockers, which worried me, was because the beta blockers kept the heart at a set rate. And now what they were going to do, they were going to inject me with something to speed the heart up. But I'd already taken medication not to speed the heart up. So there was just this, my heart just went, I felt it go, and then boom.
It's confused.
Confused. Wow. I lied to the staff. I went, "I'm all right. I'm okay." I went to the changing rooms, and it was at that point I started to think, I rode here by motorcycle. How on earth you'll be all right, Ray, I remember saying. So I waved them goodbye. Thanks a lot. I wobbled off down the corridor, hit the lift button, got off at the wrong floor, confused, got back into the lift, walked out, and I remember looking at the motorcycle, and it looked huge. It looked bigger than it did before. So I remember thinking, I can't ride it. I can't ride it home. And out the corner of my eye, there was the Florence Nightingale Museum, because Florence Nightingale the hospital was so old that used to be her hospital. Like, you know, hospital's been there since the 14th century, and then it was built on old Roman ruins. You know, so there's always been some sort of hospital there. And I remember at the corner of my eye thinking, something said, "You need to go in there. You know, it'll give you time to try to whatever's happened to you to shake your head." So you had to pay to get in. I didn't. I walked right, because I didn't know. I just walked right by, and there was a group of tiny little school children, and as I walked in, obviously because of what they'd given me, I thought I was tripping out, and I remember looking at these little tiny kids, thinking, "Are these, like, you know, the seven dwarfs?" And I'm walking around looking at them, but don't pay attention. The woman has caught me up and told me that I had to pay to get in, so I gave her some money. I walked around, managed to compose myself as much as I could, walked out to the motorcycle, started it up, and then joined the streets of London, and that was the most crazy ride home I'd ever had. And but it was a nasty experience.
You ever wonder why you always tell people you're okay when you're not?
I think, do you know what? I think because for me, I think it shows it's in the world that I was brought up in. To say that you're not was taken as a sign of weakness. And I was grown up. I was brought up in an army family. And you know, there's no other way but fight, basically. I was born to a family of warriors, and so, you know, you didn't come home and because you'd be told, like, you know, get back and sort that out, otherwise I'll sort it out. And it's like, so that kind of held that. It's not good. So it's not a good way to be. And that's what I'm trying to undo now, even at this later stage in life, really. So yeah,
just kind of, you know, I'm kind of that way in some ways. Like, I just go help everybody, and then it comes to me, I'm like, I don't have an idea, I don't have a clue, you know.
Yeah. But Peggy, you have to. I know you know this, but otherwise you wouldn't have said what you just said. It's that stopping and standing still. I have only really just come to terms with that really within the last 6 months. I couldn't, even though I wanted to help others, I couldn't. You know, my soul would kept saying, well, what about us? You know, what about a bit of self-care for you? You know, it's all right to say I can't do that, or, you know, I don't feel up to it today because of, you know. I do work with SAI, Spiritual Awakenings International. I've done work with IANS. I've been a keynote speaker with them. I've given talks, you know, so many places. But not once did it kind of dawn on me that, well, where are you, Ray? Where are you in all of this? You know, and so yeah, it's only been very recently where I've gone, hang on a minute. Been finding a lot of what am I looking for? Been finding a lot of solace in my local church. I got a very old church built in 1088. So the feeling when you walk in there, it's over 1,000 years old. It's just incredible. And you know, that's where I get my strength from. Yeah. So I love life now, but I shouldn't have had the operation. But that's me. You know, I know that.
Do you say that because you think you should have just died?
Yeah. I had it before the last heart operation in August, where they recannulated me. Otherwise it would have been a heart bypass. So once again, somebody upstairs loves me. But I wanted to go home, Peggy. I wanted to go home, and it's not so bad now, because I found my purpose. I genuinely have. I have a purpose, not a job, a purpose. You know, I'm still off. I'm still on welfare. I still suffer massively through, you know, the dark moments, and I'm still recovering from the last 2.5 years of being at death's door, which comes into part of the self-care thing again. But the desire to go home is still there. You know, this is there in my advanced directive: do not resuscitate. And you know, I cheated death too much, and I've gotten to that point now where I'm exhausted. Although I still have energy to do what I do, but the next time I'm too exhausted to fight. So I'm talking to my cardiac consultant tomorrow, so I'll have some words, have a little chat with him about things that have been going on since the operation. So yeah, it's the desire to go home is to go back to that place. I'm sure you know it's just I know it sounds selfish, and maybe it can be interpreted that way, but for me, it's just it's overwhelming. It's home, and I've not felt anywhere like it since then. Nothing. That song, nothing compares, and just so yeah. That's where I am with it.
There's a song about everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go right now.
Yes, yeah. I'm the other side of that. It's like and it's really difficult, like, you know, because it's the line of work that I do. You know, I have to be really careful that is not projected over to a client, like, you know, just as in the sense of, oh, just give up, it's beautiful, go. You know, I have to be really aware of that. And, you know, and again, I think I've been blessed in one way to have this experience because I can help others. So, yeah, but I can't forget, all of us survivors can't forget about us within this. Like, you know, for many of us, it is really difficult to you know, to carry on because of what some of us have seen.
I think we have experiences like this and we end up talking about death a lot to help others.
Yeah,
I think it might be easy to forget life, you know, stop and enjoy life while we're here.
Yeah.
Because eternity is a long time.
Yes, it is. It is, Peggy. And you know, I'm with you. While you're here, you know, get the most out of it. I certainly do. You know, I try to live each moment as it's my last. I don't look too far into the future. I'm very much an in the moment person now, rather than projecting. Oh yeah, life would be great. You know, further. No, it's about now. You know, I honestly believe that all I have is the moment and memories. Anything else is a fantasy, and I think that's kept me quite grounded, really. So yeah, try not to make too many future plans because you just don't know. But that's me, you know. I'm talking for so yeah, that's what I am.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I've loved talking to you.
Very interesting. You know, picture here with you. It's been very interesting. You're very unique, I'm sure you know, to what you were brought back with. I mean, a lot of us are brought back with gifts, but it's just like, you are the gift. You know, you just don't have gifts. You are the gift. You're just a walking, you know, miracle, the word you can see, you know, what's wrong with people and be able to know. And it seems like you're here for a reason. I mean, like your mom said, and that doesn't mean you're not here for no other reason than this.
Yes.
You're here to enjoy your life and get what you can out of your life. Like, you know, like we're all trying to do, you know, stop and smell the roses. I got to remind myself of that too. You know, put everything aside and just go do something, find something fun today. So
that's so. And do you know what, Peggy? I had forgotten. I all I could see was the purpose, and I love when you said smell the roses there. One thing I noticed on the other side was the perfume, was the scent, and I was visiting my mum one day, and my mum had some beautiful roses outside. She had them there for nearly 40 years. And I parked my motorcycle on the pathway. My mum and my sister were at the doorway saying goodbye to me. And as I pedaled the bike back, there was a rosebud, you know, and I lifted up my crash helmet and I took a smell of the scent of the rose. And I recall I just started crying. I felt my head dropped down, and I heard my sister say, "What's up?" Like, you know, and it was the smell of those roses, which was the exact same smell that I smelled on the other side. And I now have a cutting of that rose bush, which is in my garden, and so yeah, that to me is the scent of heaven. So yeah, so when you said stop and smell the roses, yeah, people stop and smell the roses. And you know, there is more to life than the death. And you're so right, Peggy. It needs to be
like your head, you know, dropped to your side and your shoulder, you're gone. Mine dropped to my chest. You know, we know what that feels like. And it's strange to be here and know what that last moment's like. And then we're back. And it seems like we're kind of always on edge because we know how close death can be. It's just like that. And it's like maybe we can kind of be afraid to live because we know it can just happen. Like we don't want the rug pulled out from us again so quickly. And we always got to be, you know, talking about death or prepared for death. Sometimes we forget, just live, smell the roses, enjoy life, because here or there, we're okay. So, but
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
really, I think we need to focus on here more sometimes. I know.
Yeah, so that's and that's beautiful to hear you say that, and that those profound words you said there. It is easy just to focus in on the dark side, and there are still the same for you. There are still moments where I just think, I'm glad I'm back here.
And I think like with any job, like if you're working in a hospital and you're just dealing with sickness, or you're working in a mental hospital and you're dealing with that kind of sickness, or, no matter what job you have, you're focused on that. Like I work on the pipeline with my husband. It's like, oh, I don't want to focus on pipe. He loves doing that.
Yes.
I'm going to put my mind somewhere else because I don't want to be there, but I got to work with it. And so, but yeah, like any job, I think we just need to step away, and it's really hard, especially I think when we're empaths, we tend to soak up, especially I imagine you, where you actually can see what's going on physically with people. I take on people's emotions and I just can feel what's going on with them, and I have to be away from everybody for a while to get that away from me.
Yes.
So I can't imagine you with when you were around cancer and illness, and you're even seeing it as a physical thing. Yes, in people, or that one time, going from person to person, how that must darken you. I don't know what else word to use.
It didn't darken me.
Okay.
It was the first time I'd seen it. I've seen it since. I'd seen it in Pennsylvania at an Irons talk. I was talking to Jeff O'Driscoll.
I know him.
Just love talking to him. We're in the hotel lobby, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd seen a person with something sitting upon them, and I since know that what I'd seen has been verified. So I'm in communication with that person, and I remember talking to Jeff O'Driscoll, and that's what I'd seen, was this thing on top of this person, literally feeding off them. The person that was not aware whatsoever, and in reference to what you asked about, how do I see stuff? I remember how bizarre I felt talking to Jeff, and then out of the corner of my eye, watching this person walk away with this thing on top of them, and but still having presence to talk to Jeff. That was like a real twist. But again, I was born as a seer, so to such a degree. I'll keep this one short. Father was in the army, based in Germany. Mother was German. I remember being walked over to the ornamental gardens, which were opposite the place where we were staying, and there was an old lady there. Great big black rimmed hat, stooped to her spine, cane in the left hand, all dressed in black. The dress went down to her feet, black shoes, black gloves, black veil, and we stopped by this lady, and there was little old me, maybe 4 or 5, I think about 5, my mother, and then she was called Omar. And I remember hearing my mum talk to Omar in German, and then the conversation got heated. And then I remember Omar walking off angrily, just like this old lady. Still didn't see her face. The only one in my family who's seen her face is my mum and my sister, but I never have. So that was back in late 60s, And I remember asking my mum, why were you arguing with Omar? And Mum looked down at me and she said, Omar said it was time that you were to go with her to be taught, to start learning about who you are. And but I said no, that I was going to teach you, and that you was to stay with me. And well, okay. And so fast forward 2005, I'm in Germany with my mum in the very town opposite where the ornamental gardens were. We were there to visit family. And we were just about to turn the corner in Scherzenstrasse, and the light changed, and just the light around it. As we turned the corner, guess who was standing there? It was Omar. Still dressed in black, still with a stoop cane, but I mean, I hadn't seen her since I was 4 or 5. You know, that was the last time I'd seen her. And by rights, working it out, I don't know how old she would have been. I couldn't even tell you, you know. But she said hello to me, and she still had a cane, and she moved her index finger as if to like, so she knew who I was. But something told me to look at my mum, and because I knew that Omar was judging my mum by what Omar was seeing as she was looking at Raymond. And there was a shuffle in my mum. I'll never forget that. My mum looked uncomfortable, you know, and but that's another story. But yeah, so these you know, to be trained to see unusual things.
Now, is cancer the only illness you see?
What's the most recent one I've been doing? Quite a few, and bearing in mind again that I have to wait for you to speak to me. There's in all I do in my seeing, there's still the privacy of the person. You know, I've done sneaky stuff before. I've been asked to do sneaky stuff, and I was caught. You know, I knew it wasn't right, but I was asked by my mother to do it, and but I was caught doing it. You know, by the very person. I mean, how the person knew. The answer was, ask Raymond to stop what he's doing. I don't like him visiting me. That was the answer. Like, you know, so but again, that's not a story. But yeah, the seeing side is as easy to me as it is for you to sit there and breathe now. That's but there are caveats. It's the seeing side is as easy for me to do as it is for you breathing as you are now. And that's as much thought as I give to it. But I can't look at stuff without being allowed. And that's what I've learned over. And I can't say I'll offer you healing. That the person has to ask me. You know, and I knew I could do this. Do you remember the lady who I walked down the corridor with? I knew that the soul escaped the body when it was being heavily sedated with opioids. That was in the room that I'm in now, in this corner here. One night, I remember I looked up, and I'd been on the chemo unit. She was one of my clients. She used to come in. I had the little chapel room where I used to work out of, and I'd recognised her soul. You know, she started talking to me, but the soul was lost. And that's the first thing I picked up, but the soul recognized me. It obviously got lost, and it come to see me. So I spoke to the soul and said, I'll bring you back. I have that ability to bring the soul back to the person, you know. And so when I got in the next day, she was booked in for her chemo, and I asked her. I said, Tracy, was you in a lot of pain last night? I said, about 9:15 in the evening. She said, yeah, Ray. She said, I was in so much pain that I was crawling around on the floor on all fours. I couldn't take any more Oromorph, otherwise I would have overdosed. You know, and that was when I'd realized that's what sets the soul free. It's the drugs that set the soul free. You know, and when I actually ended up, it was such another blessing. I was asked to work at a hospice, and walking through the hospice, everybody was heavily sedated. And that was, to me, as a seer, I watched the souls literally pinging off the walls while the patients were lying on their beds in the fetal position. And it blew my socks off, because I was to go and see another woman who was terminally ill. She had like 48 hours to live. And even when I got to see this woman, after I'd seen the souls pinging off the walls, I was trying to compose myself. When I got to the bed where the woman was on the chemo unit, so I'd known her for quite a while. And when the curtains got pulled back, again, didn't have a hair on her head, clearly was close to death, and had an oxygen mask on. And as I sat down on the bed next to her, I heard her, she mumbled, and her daughter moved in. And I'd already said to her daughter that your mum's soul had come to visit me last night. But I don't know whether she believed me or not. And so when I sat next to the person who was terminally ill, and she said this thing through a mask, what she actually said was that my soul had come to visit Raymond last night. And you should have seen the daughter's face. It was like, wow. And that, you know, to hear that was remarkable. So those were the insights.
Has scientists studied you?
No, I won't allow it. If scientist wants to know how I work, I would say, well, speak to my clients, like, you know, they'll speak for me, you know, because I'm only human. I don't get it wrong very often, but I do get it wrong, and it will be the day when I'll be sitting there, you know, and you know, because this doesn't, even though I can tell you what's wrong with you, you still have to allow me to do that. You know, I can't sit here and go, oh yeah, you know, what's in that envelope? Well, none of that. The way that I work is that the soul speaks to me. It allows me to look. And until that happens, sometimes it can take the soul. I bump into people and I've literally seen them vibrate when the soul has gone, wow. And then I know straight away, I start knowing what's wrong with you, like, you know, because the soul will tell me, like, well, wow, we've never met anyone like Raymond before.
So if I say to you right now, can you look at me and see if you see like cancer? Like, does that work like that?
I would, if you asked me, I would give you a private answer. I'd message you back, but I wouldn't say on here, because I simply
tell me if you see.
I already see one thing on it, but I'm not going to mention it here. But I'm that, so you've allowed me to look. So that is, I do an awful lot of that. But again, Pegi, people have to ask me. It's not my right to look, like, you know.
Yeah, you go ahead and look and message me later.
I shall. So that's a little tiny. We scratched the surface of Raymond O'Brien's escapades up to this moment in time. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Pegi. It really has, and I hope you viewers have enjoyed it too.
Yes, I have enjoyed it very much. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
And you
later.
Thank you. I shall do. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.